From 1967's Wild Honey album, we just heard the Beach Boys with Here Comes the Night, a song that the group would later return to and re-record in a very controversial fashion for their 1979 album L.A., or L.A. Light Album. Endless Summer Quarterly's David Beard is back with us again for another one of our spirited discussions about Beach Boys albums. And you know, David, there's some really great material on this record, but unfortunately, the 10-minute-long disco re-recording of the song we just played, Here Comes the Night, is so reviled by Beach Boys fans that its diabolical reputation has tainted the entire album.
Agreed. The album is in itself flawed in one way for me, and that is the track selection. Because the songs that work for me, which is the music written by Carl Wilson with Jeffrey Cushing Murray, is some of Carl Wilson's best. Carl and Jeffrey Cushing Murray are almost kind of like the Brian Tony Asher Pet Sounds experience. Here are two guys who are both going through the same things, writing about a real emotional, turmoily time in their lives, and it really works. But you get to the point where track 7 comes on, and all of a sudden you're sucked into disco hell for a while. By the time you come out of it, you're numb, and Baby Blue comes on, and then Going South, and then Shortening Bread, and you're like, what just happened?
Right. You're being forcibly taken to the disco. Just to run down the track list, on side 1 we have Good Timin', Lady Linda, Full Sail, Angel Come Home, Love Surrounds Me, and Sumahama. Side 2, we get the aforementioned 10-minute disco version of Here Comes the Night, Baby Blue, Goin' South, and then Shortening Bread.
So Baby Blue, a beautiful song, Goin' South, another beautiful song, get lost because they're wedged between this sandwich of awfulness. Although he did co-write Good Timin' with Carl, Brian's one lone contribution on this released album was Shortening Bread. And so it was like, well, this is all we could get out of him, so here, he's on the album. Shortening Bread might have been okay on the adult. I don't want to go too deep here, but there was, a couple of years before.
Right.
Well, there was going to be an adult child album, and that's where this came from. The story here, the story of L.A., is the Beach Boys had signed with CBS Records.
Right.
And it was a public thing. It was out in the news, so their Warner Reprise contract was coming to an end, and because it was made public that the new contract was out there and they were going to go to CBS Records, things fizzled with Warner Reprise, as you would imagine, and MIU ended up being a lackluster event with some nice moments.
And for the sake of the audience who might not know what we're talking about, the MIU album, released on Reprise Records in October of 1978, is probably best known for being the album where the Beach Boys' cover of Come Go With Me can be found. Right.
But again, you have a situation where they were given an advance from CBS Records, gave them advance, said, here's a bunch of money for signing with us. In exchange for this money, we want a new Beach Boys album with Brian behind, back
right
in control, behind, in the producer chair and doing his thing. So that was kind of the promise. I don't know if it was written down that Brian was going to do that, but that was kind of the idea going in, that that's what this record was going to be. So they went to CBS Records in New York and had a meeting with Walter Yetnikoff, and this is after they got the advance and spent the money.
Right.
And they sit down in the office. Here they are, the five Beach. This is no Bruce, just the 5 Beach Boys. You got the 3 Wilson brothers: Carl, Dennis, and Brian, Al Jardine, and Mike Love, with Jerry Schilling, who was their tour manager at the time. He took them to this meeting because they had no money. They took the advance, spent it, and CBS was going to sue them because they hadn't turned anything in.
Right.
At that meeting, if CBS said, we're going to sue you, they would have been in really, really bad shape. So they're at this meeting, and this is all according to Jerry Schilling.
Right.
Who's one of the interviewers in this new issue. He says, at the meeting, he says to me, David, guess who was the one who spoke up at the meeting and got the guys down to Criterion, Florida? And I said, Carl? And he goes, no. I go, Mike? And he goes, no. It was Brian.
Huh.
Yeah. So there you, okay, so Brian is kind of selling himself right there at this meeting and saying, Mr. Yetnikoff, I've got some ideas, and I want to go down to Criteria in Miami, Florida, and work there. They go down to Florida. They did everything they could to get the most out of Brian.
Right.
Unfortunately, within 2 days of being down there, Brian, battling his demons, his interest waned, and a phone call had to be made. And my impression is it was Brian who called Bruce and asked Bruce to come down to Criteria and help them.
David, before we continue with the story of the making of this record, I want to play track 1 off the album. It's a beautiful song, and I think the song that sounds the most like a Beach Boys record, and that's Good Timin'.
It is. It's written by Brian and Carl. Does not have Brian singing on it, though, which is unfortunate.
It's sort of like a Son of Surfer Girl in a way.
That's interesting. I've always Good Timing to me is like the next, if Surfer Girl's the beginning, the kind of the birth,
right,
then All This Is That is kind of middle age, and then going on, Good Timing is kind of that maturation of the next phase of life.
Just a beautiful track, those lush harmonies. That's what you expect on a Beach Boys record. Good Timin', the name of that song from 1979's L.A. Light album. Endless Summer Quarterly's David Beard joins us to chat about this record and give some background information. And when we left off, the Beach Boys had called Bruce Johnston back into the fold. He had originally joined the group in 1965 and then split, I guess, around 1973, and he came back and has been a part of the Beach Boys ever since.
Well, what's different about this, what's unique about this, is Bruce wasn't coming in to rejoin the Beach Boys.
Yeah.
Bruce was coming in to sing. He was coming in to help produce, but he was not coming. The initial invite, I certainly don't get the impression he was coming in to produce their next album. I got the impression he was hey, we need somebody to kind of come down, and will you come down and produce these sessions? That's kind of the impression I get.
Right.
And then it became clear as the months went on that Brian wasn't going to invest himself in the album. What happens over time, so they go to Criteria when that's August 30th, 1978 through September 1st, 1978. Now, were they there a day or two other than that? It's unclear, but thanks to Alan Boyd, Beach Boys archivist and Beach Boy savant, he was able to share with me information that he actually took from a Beach Boys reel box that he had, and it's an original demo tape labeled Criteria Studio B, and the dates are 8/30/78 to 9/1/78, and the songs, I'll read those songs to you.
Sure.
Here are the songs that were worked on with Brian, and then Bruce did come down, but these were the songs that were worked on. California Feeling,
mm-hmm.
Santa Ana Winds, Surrounds Us, which became Love Surrounds Me,
right,
Baby Blue Eyes, which became Baby Blue, I'm Asking You Please, which became I'm Begging You Please, which is, if anyone's heard that, it's hard to listen to.
Right.
Looking Down the Coast, which is a part of Al's Monterey, Santa Ana Wind thing.
Right.
Brian's Back, Calendar Girl, Good Timin', and Shortening Bread. None of these songs are the Carl Wilson, Jeffrey Cushing Murray tracks of the released L.A. album. Those songs are kind of the bedrock. The Carl Wilson tracks are just incredibly strong. They're emotive. They're some of Carl's best work. As much as I like Dennis's tracks and what he contributed, I always like when it's a group contribution. But for L.A., because of what Bruce did to it, and it is Bruce who did this to this album, because it was left to Bruce at some point. Here are all the tracks we're working on. Here's what we're doing, and then all of a sudden they use all these different studios. Everybody's working somewhere different, and it's kind of almost like a democratic process where Dennis is just working on his music, Carl's just working on his music, Al and Mike were kind of working together, doing Lady Linda together with Ron Outback,
right.
And then Meanwhile, back at the ranch, you have Bruce is not a full-time Beach Boy yet, but he's working on these songs, and he's decided, for some reason, to work with Kurt Betcher. Well, and that's not for really some reason. They were friends. You know, he knew Kurt from his Millennium days, and they worked. Kurt, as many people know, worked with Gary Usher for the Sagittarius album. Mm-hmm. Really interesting music, but for some reason, all of a sudden, Bruce decides he's going to do a disco version of a song from 1967. And why? Who put it in his head? Now, maybe he went down to Criteria, and they're there, and the Bee Gees were working on their next album, and he went, oh, well, you know, here's Maurice Gibb, and he's playing these cool tracks for me. I wonder if the Beach Boys can tap into that market and make us, maybe we can get something going over here, too. Why would you, as the Beach Boys, do that? And it's interesting, Jerry Schilling to me said he remembered that there was discussion of whether or not the Beach Boys should even be doing a disco record.
Right.
In interviewing Carly Munoz, Carly says at one point when they were just standing outside taking a break or waiting for their name to be called to go in and record, at Western Recorders in California, at one point Carl walked outside, they were outside. Carl walked out and said, hey, we're going to put Constant Companion on the album. That was a song by Dennis and Carly that ended up on Dennis's second album that was released in 2008, finally, Bamboo. But at that time, that was a song that was selected. So what happened there?
And that was a huge mistake, because you take those 10 or so minutes of the disco version of Here Comes the Night, you could have easily fit 2 or 3 more songs on that album, and Constant Companion is a very progressive, ahead-of-its-time track. It sounds like the sort of thing Sting would do when he went solo in 1985. It's this sort of jazzy pop that we heard so much in the 80s. Dennis Wilson's Constant Companion, a song that could have and should have been on the Beach Boys' 1979 L.A. Light album. We're talking with Endless Summer Quarterly's editor David Beard about that record and some of the songs that didn't make it.
What's nice, if any of your listeners have recently subscribed to ESQ, and I'm hoping they have, and if they haven't, that's certainly a great time to do it, because we're fortunate, as always, to have Craig Slowinski and his amazing sessionography that he provides the readers with. So while you're reading the story of the L.A. album and the circumstances, you're seeing below, going across the bottom of each page, the sessionography and understanding the dates, the songs that were worked on, to the extent of which the songs were worked on. And you get a really kind of different impression of what L.A. should have been. One of the things I like to do if it's necessary, and with L.A. I think it's one of those necessary evils, to kind of go, hey, reader, try this. Put this order together, try these songs, and get rid of Shortin' and Bread and get rid of Here Comes the Night, and listen to these 12 tracks and see if this doesn't just completely change your view of this period of the group. What I've put together based on the information of the sessionography and based on the interviews, I hope that I'm providing the readers with a whole new experience of what I've got is Brian's Back, Good Timin', Constant Companion, yep, Santa Ana Winds, California Feelin', and Full Sail for side 1.
Wow.
Yeah, and then you turn it over, or you just keep listening. Then you have Angel Come Home, Love Surrounds Me, Sumahama, Lady Linda, Baby Blue, Goin' South.
That's a great album.
That's a whole different experience, and it allows you to appreciate some of Carl and Dennis Wilson's best work.
We're back talking with David Beard of Endless Summer Quarterly magazine about the Beach Boys' 1979 album, L.A. Light album, and we were talking about some of the tracks that didn't make the record. Now let's focus on the ones that did, for better or worse. We played Good Timin', which is one of the best cuts on the album, and up next is Lady Linda, track 2 on the album, which is also one of the better cuts. In fact, this was a hit in Great Britain.
Yeah, this is kind of like Al's California Girls as a songwriter, because he works with the Bach choral. Jesu, man of oh gosh, I almost had it. You know what it is off the top of your head?
Is it Jesu, Joy of a Man's Desiring?
Yes, thank you.
Right.
But it's similar to the beginning of California Girls, where Brian introduces the idea of the Bach, and so it's kind of similar in that respect. This is a big number, it's hard to say why subjectively it was bigger in the UK than it was here, but it's a really gorgeous track and a really, really beautiful recording.
Full Sail is sort of an overlooked song, and again, this was one I gravitated to when I first got the album because I like the mood of it, I like the vibe of it, I like the lyric, Carl's performance. Everything about this works for me as a mood piece and a song.
Yeah, this is the one that Jerry Schilling pointed to and said, if you just were to hear this song and not know it was the Beach Boys, it would be the song that you would go, wow, that'd make a great Beach Boy track. This is one of Carl Wilson's best recordings ever.
Yeah, certainly one of the highlights of the Beach Boys' 1979 L.A. album, Full Sail, and track 4 on the record, as we just quickly run through the tracks, Angel Come Home. Another modern-sounding track, almost like an Elvis Costello song. Dennis Wilson on lead vocals here.
Yeah, it's got an unusual, it's like a semi-rock thing going on. It's not a rock and roll song, but it's got a really heavy groove to it.
Yeah, and it's another one of those great Carl Wilson, Jeffrey Cushing Murray songs. Track 5 on the album is a song written by Dennis and Jeffrey Cushing Murray, Love Surrounds Me. Now, you want to talk about atmospherics.
Yeah, this album in general, these songs that we're talking about, I dare anybody to put the headphones on.
Oh yeah, yep.
Because there's so much going on in these songs. It's really kind of liberating if you hear everything. Love Surrounds Me's got neat little mistakes random things going on in the background, and you're like, whoa, what was that? And it's interesting and it's cool. And it's not so much, I wonder if that was a mistake. It's just kind of like, that's random. That's interesting. but knowing Dennis, he probably wanted it that way.
And it's certainly one of the strongest cuts on the album. The next one is really Mike's lone contribution, Sumahama, which again wound up being a mild hit over in Great Britain.
Yeah, it's lovely, and it's a really like the songs that we're talking about. All the songs we talked about up until this point, a very expressive recording, a very emotive recording. Mike sounds really good on it. The guys back him up great. Bruce sounds good on it in the background. It's a lovely track, and it's a really interesting love song. So let's talk about Baby Blue next.
Well, let me just say this: there was a single edit of "Here Comes the Night."
It was unfortunately they didn't put it here.
That's where you know what? That's where it should have been on, because the single edit is tolerable. If you hate disco, you'd only have to suffer through 3 minutes and 30 seconds of it.
That's true, but even then, even if it's not a re-recording of a 1967 track, it's still a song that does not fit the mood and the vibe.
Yep. No, you're right.
Of these songs, it's like, what happened? I guess Bruce got pleased with himself on the first side. He said, I like these first 6 tracks. They sound really good together. And then when he flipped it over, said, I'll start it off with my disco project. And then I'll put on another 2 great songs that I like, here, this Baby Blue and Going South, and then I'll tag the one song we managed to get out of Brian. I just don't know.
Well, you know what who knows really, but it sounds like someone was in his ear. Someone, like disco is hot. I mean, somebody who was a little out of touch maybe and said disco is hot. This is what's happening. McCartney just released Good Night Tonight, which was kind of a quasi-disco tune. And, I could see somebody at the label, at his ear saying, you need to have like a really commercial thing. Disco's big. Look, but the Bee Gees reinvented themselves. Maybe something like that happened.
Yeah.
All right, we've danced around it enough. Here it is, the short version, though. The short version, the single version of Here Comes the Night. The Beach Boys go disco. We're talking to Endless Summer Quarterly's David Beard about the Beach Boys' L.A. Light album. Earlier, we had played Baby Blue, which is the track after Here Comes the Night on side 2, as we go track by track. David, any thoughts?
Yeah, Dennis and Carl together at this point was just heaven on earth. I mean, those voices just sound so good together. It's really special.
Yeah. And then we get Going South, which I know a lot of people don't like or think of as cocktail jazz. And I think those same people, had Randy Newman released this, they would be raving about how wonderful it is.
Yeah, I like it a lot, and I think it makes a perfect album closer. For me, I think probably Full Sail is the one that I connect with a little bit more. But again, all the tracks on this album by Carl and Jeffrey Cushing Murray are the bedrock.
We always talk a little bit about the cover of the record. Here we get like what's essentially a collection of postcards.
Yeah, this is, I don't know what happened. The way Ed Roach explained it to me was that if you look at the inner sleeve, there are a bunch of live pictures taken by Ed.
Yeah.
And the original, his understanding was the original thing was going to be, his pictures were going to be on the outside of the album.
Right.
Then, I guess, in the meantime, they had all these individual artists do these things for these different songs. And I'd be curious to know if these artists had ever actually heard the songs, because the one for Good Timing is awful.
Oh, no, wait.
Short and Bread is awful.
Yeah, the worst one is Love Surrounds Me, because it's quasi-pornographic. It's got nothing to do with the song.
Pretty bad. But, so then when the picture disc of L.A. came out, they took Ed's pictures and put them on the backside of that picture disc.
Right.
So I asked Ed, what does he think about the finished product of the album? And he said, well, I associate more with the picture disc because I was originally told my pictures were going to be on the outside of the album, and then they weren't. And then when the picture disc came out, they were at least on the backside.
Well, there we have it, the good, the bad, and the ugly about the Beach Boys' 1979 album, L.A. Light Album. And David, before we wrap up, I'd like to get into some Beach Boys news here. In about 2 weeks, Brian Wilson will be releasing a new solo album called No Peer Pressure. And a few months ago, we learned that a lot of young guest stars will be singing on the album, in addition to Beach Boys Al Jardine and David Marks and one-time Beach Boy Blondie Chaplin. But looking at the track list up on Amazon here, it looks like not as many of the guest stars that had been announced will actually appear on this record.
Yeah, I'm pointing the first thing that I saw when the announcement came in February of because there's different variables of different types of versions of the album that you can buy. You can buy a 13-track or a 16-track or whatever it is. And the first thing I looked at was the 16-track, because I thought, okay, how is this different than the 13? And then I looked at it deep, a little bit more introspectively and said, oh, okay. When you take away these young guest stars,
right,
you end up with 11 songs. And so you end up with 11 songs that are either just Brian, or Brian with Al Jardine and Blondie Chaplin, or Jeffrey Foskett, or Matt Jardine, or David Marks, or what have you. And I thought, okay, well, 11 tracks, that's pretty darn close to an album.
Yeah.
And the way I'm going to listen to that album once it's released is I'm going to listen to those 11 songs first. And I'm going to listen to the other songs as kind of bonus tracks.
Well, the first song released from the album that we got to listen to and also get a lyric video for over on YouTube was The Right Time. Similar in a way to the song Lay Down Burden from Brian Wilson's 1998 Imagination album, but what an incredible performance. David Marks' guitar part is just tasty, and those vocals from Al Jardine. I mean, what can you say?
Al Jardine, I wish more people knew that name.
Yeah.
I feel in one regard that we're pretty lucky that we know who Al is and that we're able to hear him and appreciate him as Beach Boy fans. He's known for Help Me Rhonda. He's known for California Dreamin' and their cover of it anyway, and Come Go With Me.
Right.
But his voice means so much more. It's like his voice. You hear a Beach Boy record. If you hear his voice, you know it's the Beach Boys just as much as you would Carl or Brian or Mike. And that's not necessarily true with Dennis. You unless it's early '60s that you hear
right.
like "Do You Want to Dance?" Beach Boys. But the other voices, if you hear them, you identify them with the Beach Boys. And Al's voice is very important to music history, and their overall sound in general. So, good on Brian for using Al and having him there as a part of that process. Anytime that you've got Al Jardine singing lead vocal on a recording, I'm there to listen.
David, I want to give you a chance to again mention how people can subscribe to Endless Summer Quarterly and where they can go online to find all that information.
The easiest place and the first place I would point people is Facebook. Just go to Facebook and type in Endless Summer Quarterly, and you'll find our page, like our page. And you'll be able to follow posts on how to get the latest magazine or to subscribe to a one-year subscription. If you're not sure, you can always ask us right there on our Endless Summer Quarterly's timeline, or just send us a message from the Facebook page. I'll be answering it, and I'll point the person or persons in the right direction. I'll provide them with links right to the page if they're just interested in a particular issue, or if they'd like to subscribe for a year, I can just give them a direct link that will take them right to the page.
Hey, take care. Good to hear from you as always.
All right. Thank you so much.